Hi, this is David. In this video, I'm going to walk through one of the lessons in the Mastering GitHub Copilot series that was created by our friends at GitHub and Microsoft Learn. The last few videos, I went through this beginner lesson, getting started with GitHub Copilot. I did that over the last 3 videos. Today, I'm going to tackle one of these intermediate ones, particularly this using GitHub Copilot with JavaScript. I actually forked this repository into my own GitHub account. I'm not sure if that's necessary or not, but if I open this up, you can see here is the repository. Here is the lesson, and it's broken up into sections. I think there are 4 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. Section 4 looks like it has 2 parts to it, and it'll work with a JavaScript project and show you how to work with GitHub Copilot inside of Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is one integrated development environment, or IDE. It's compatible with GitHub Copilot, but you can use lots of other IDEs as well. And just to follow this lesson, you want to use Visual Studio Code. It is a free cross-platform, lightweight download. Feel free to install it. However, you don't really need to for this exercise because we've set up a code spaces for this. And code space is a virtual environment that contains all of the things that we need already pre-installed and pre-configured. And I've already done that. You can click on this, it'll create it for you. It just takes about a minute or so to spin up. But here is my virtual environment right here. You can see it's running inside of a browser, but it has Visual Studio Code, and it has an entire repository containing our JavaScript project on here. Now, we're talking today about GitHub Copilot, which is an AI-powered tool that allows you to work to accelerate your application development, and to do so by interacting with it in a natural language like English. So you can type sentences and questions into the GitHub Copilot chat. And if you don't see the chat, you can either click on this icon up here and say open chat. That'll work. Or you can go over to the hamburger menu here and say view chat. Both of those will get you to the right place. Notice it's in agent mode right now. If I'm just asking questions, I could just be in ask mode. Ask mode just doesn't change your code. It just answers your questions. Edit mode actually will change the questions, and agent mode has even more power. It can actually execute commands for you on your behalf. So I'll just leave it in agent mode because that will work. They build on each other. And I'll show you that when I press the slash key, all of these built-in commands come up right here. This is just a few of them. So for example, if I want to say slash doc, I don't think that was listed there, but it will. It's asking which document here. And so in order to tell it which document, I could just open up a document. Let me just open up this routes document. And now I'll say slash doc here. And because it's open, you see that it shows up in the context right here. And I can add more to the context even without them being open by dragging them from the Explorer down into this file right here. And here it is, it's going through and it's documenting what all of the methods in routes.js, what they all do. You see there's a bunch of gets and a couple of posts in here, and that might be really useful if you're trying to understand someone else's code, or maybe you want to write documentation for that code. So all these things here that you can do, and if you want a bit more information, you can just type /help if you get stuck, and it'll tell you what these commands can do for you. Now, GitHub Copilot does have the ability to write code, to generate code for you. There's a few ways that you can do that. I could type something in natural language down here in the chat, or I can just add a comment. In JavaScript, I preface anything with // that means it's a comment. It'll be ignored at execution time. And I'll just say, you notice that there's a bunch of gets up here, but I want to create one for get a random recipe. This is an application that allows you to update recipes. When I press enter, look what happens. A bunch of code appeared. And it might be difficult to tell on the screen, but this is in italics and it's a little bit lighter than the rest of this. So what I can do is just press tab to accept that. And that is, it created a new route, recipes/random. It connected to the database, And then it ran this query, select star from recipes, order by random, limit 1. So just one recipe from here, this code will be. And then down below, you'll see it's actually suggesting another method that I didn't ask for. So, this seems to be missing a delete recipe route. We should add that as well. Well, I'm going to accept this one here by pressing enter. They get a random recipe, and then I'll press escape. So I don't accept the delete recipe one right here. So now I've got a new route in here. And that's all right, but let me go up to this route up here. There's one that just gets a list of recipes. This one right here. So this one right here just gets a list of recipes. You can tell that it's, no, not this one. This one right here. So right here, you say it gets a list of recipes. Select star from recipes. That totally makes sense. But what I want to do is I'm going to change this a little bit. I want GitHub Copilot to help me. So if I highlight this particular route, then I could press Control I. If you're on a Mac, it'd be Command I, and that brings up this little inline Copilot chat window. So I have some context. It's going to do something on this specific line that I'm on, and I'll say something like sort by title. And you see it changed it. This query now appended order by title on the end of the query right here. And if I like that, I can accept it. You notice it's in green. That indicates it's a change. And if I don't like that, I could hit regenerate to try to come up with another way of doing this. There aren't a whole lot of ways of sorting a data set in SQL. But if I totally don't want to undo it, just hit close. Don't accept that. But I'm going to accept that. And now it's actually rendered to here. Now I've got a modification to this route here that was provided to me by GitHub Copilot. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to use agent mode to add new functionality. And in fact, it suggested this earlier that maybe I should add some delete functionality. There's no route here to get delete, but it isn't enough to add a route to delete. There has to be a web page that accepts it and shows you what's happened. There has to be some code on the back end that actually does the delete. It might be multiple things that have to happen. So here's what I'm going to do. I've in the chat window, I want to be in agent mode. That's the most powerful one. I say implement the ability to delete recipes. Implement this using an HTML form and a new post recipes ID delete route handler. Make sure the buttons exist on both the recipe view and edit pages, and write tests for your work. This is a really good prompt because it tells it all the information that I know. It just doesn't tell it how to do it. Maybe I don't know JavaScript that well, or maybe I just don't feel like typing. I want them to start it for me. So I'll do this here, and it's going to look through my entire project, all the files, figure out what it needs to do, and make those changes that I requested. That took less than a minute to go through all that. I sped the video up a little bit so you didn't have to wait for it, but you can see the files that it changed. The route.js, the one that I was on, it created a new route for that. It created a test for it right here, and it created a web page added to a web page with a button to actually delete something. And you can see down here that all of the changes, I can loop through the changes one at a time like this and see what they are. And for each one, if I don't like it, I can undo it, or I can keep it. And I'm going to keep each one of these changes. Keep, and there we are. Okay, and then now that I've got them, it says, do I want to allow the test to run? So there is a test that it created in here. Let's allow it to run. In agent mode, it has the power to actually run these things for us. And here is the command that's going to execute. And you can see the test pass. So it created a new test, a new test suite, 3 total tests passed in here. So whatever code I was in here, then the test that deleted it, this is probably the new test right here, then that actually worked. The next thing I want to do is that I've said before there are multiple ways of doing the same thing. For example, there are naming conventions that you have. They're not necessarily the right naming conventions, but they're the right ones for your project or for your team. There are frameworks that you use on your project. There are just styles of coding and architecture and structures of folders, things that are you want to be common to your project, that makes it consistent, makes it easier to maintain, makes it more efficient. When it generates the code, GitHub Copilot does look at the files that are in here already, and it tries to match those style things, but you can be more explicit than that. And the way you're more explicit is by adding these instructions for GitHub to use. And the instructions are placed in this folder right here, this GitHub folder, or .github folder here. What I want to do is to create a file, and by convention, I should name it copilot-instructions.md. And you can see that by its extension, that it is in fact a markdown file. And this will apply to the entire project. So in the lesson, I've just copied this out of the lesson. Here's this markdown here. Project overview, it explains what its goals are, and then it tells me which technologies I'm using. I'm using Node.js with Express.js, SQL.js, I'm using Handlebar.js, testing, I'm using Jest, styling vanilla CS. So whenever it creates something new, it tries to use those things. It won't go off and find some other library for doing databases, for example. Code styling, maybe I want to use Hungarian notation. I would put that in here. I want to make sure all the queries are in this folder and all the view templates are in that folder and so on. Certain patterns that I want to use. So when it creates this thing, when it creates something new, it'll try its best to adhere to whatever instructions I've given it in here. And as I said, this will apply to the entire project, anything that's gone anywhere on the project. If I want to have special rules just for certain parts of the application, then I can do that as well. And I'll put that in this instructions folder. And I'm going to create one here. I'm going to call it new file called styling.instructions.md right here. If the instructions folder doesn't exist, go ahead and create it. And this one, it doesn't really matter what I name it, as long as it's in that instructions folder. And I will just copy this from the lab, paste it in, and you see at the top it says apply to public star.css. So only the CSS files in the public folder will GitHub look at these rules. And it'll have class names and custom properties for each color, et cetera, et cetera. So now I can do it, something that tells it what are the rules for creating and modifying code in the generally throughout the project, or only for a certain part, certain files within that project. And let's test that. Let's say something like, while I'm in agent mode, I'll go into chat and I'll say, create a new view to display, better spell display right, FAQs, and run that. And I would expect, because I told it that all the view templates should be in the views folder and it should be using handlebar, that's what happens. So if I go down here to the views folder right here, then whatever file that it creates, it created one FAQ, it is in the views folder, and it is this HBS extension tells me that it is using the handlebars framework for doing that. I'll go ahead and keep that. In this video, I've shown you how to use GitHub Copilot to maintain a JavaScript project. This is David. Thank you for watching.